Welcome. I want you to look at a shape. You have seen it 1,000 times. It is a shape that has not changed in 60 years. A long hood, a sloping roofline, a rounded rear end, two round headlights, a low, wide stance. It is the shape of the Porsche 911, and it is the most recognizable silhouette in automotive history. 60 years. That is how long the 911 has been in continuous production. No other sports car has lasted this long. The Chevrolet Corvette has changed generations. The Ferrari 308 became the 328, became the 348, became the F355, became the 360, became the F430, became the 458, became the 488, became the F8. The 911 has remained the 911. Not unchanged. That is the miracle. The 911 has evolved. It has grown larger, faster, more sophisticated. It has added turbochargers, all-wheel drive, water cooling, hybrid systems. It has survived the death of its air-cooled engine. It has survived the threat of replacement by the 928, by the 944, by the 968. It has survived changing tastes, changing regulations, changing technology. And through it all, it has remained the 911. The same basic layout, the engine in the back, the weight over the rear axle, the distinctive frog eye headlights. The 911 is not just a car, it is an institution. It is a cultural icon. It is the sports car that defines sports cars. Over the next 8 hours, we are going to tell the story of the Porsche 911, from the mind of Ferdinand Buzzi Porsche to the racetracks of Le Mans, from the air-cooled Flat 6 to the water-cooled masterpiece of the GT3, from the Widowmaker 930 Turbo to the civilized daily driver of today. This is not just a history lesson. This is a story about obsession, about a family that refused to let their creation die, about engineers who believed that the rear engine was not a flaw, but a feature, about drivers who pushed the 911 to the edge and sometimes beyond, about the most successful sports car in history. Let us begin. Let us go back to 1948, to the car that started everything. Part 1. The Birth of a Legend. Ferdinand Porsche was one of the greatest automotive engineers in history. He designed the Mercedes-Benz SSK. He designed the Audi Union Grand Prix cars. He designed the Volkswagen Beetle, the most successful car design of all time. And in 1948, he designed the Porsche 356. The 356 was the first car to carry the Porsche name. It was based on the Volkswagen Beetle. The engine was a flat 4 mounted in the rear. The chassis was modified. The body was hand-formed aluminum. The 356 was small, light, and nimble. It was not powerful, but it was balanced. It handled beautifully. It was the beginning. The 356 evolved over the next 15 years. It grew larger engines. It gained a hardtop coupe version. It became faster, more refined, more successful. By 1963, Porsche had sold over 75,000 356s. The company was profitable. The brand was respected. But Ferry Porsche, Ferdinand's son, knew they needed something new. The 356 was aging. The design was from the 1940s. The competition was catching up. Ferry wanted a car that would carry Porsche into the next generation. He gave the project to his son, Ferdinand Alexander Porsche, known as Buzzi Porsche. Buzzi Porsche was 26 years old when he began designing the new car. He had grown up in the factory. He had learned to draw from his father. He had learned to engineer from his grandfather. He understood that Porsche needed a car that was recognizable as a Porsche, but was completely new. The design brief was simple. The car had to be a 2+2, with 2 small rear seats. It had to be faster than the 356. It had to be comfortable enough for daily driving. And it had to be beautiful. Buzzi drew hundreds of sketches. He tried different roof lines, different headlight configurations, different tail treatments. He settled on a shape that was clean, simple, timeless. The long hood flowed into a sloping roofline that ended in a rounded rear. The headlights were round, set into the fenders. The rear window was curved. The overall effect was elegant, athletic, unmistakable. The car was called the 901. It was unveiled at the Frankfurt Motor Show in September 1963. The reaction was positive. Porsche had orders for the car, but there was a problem. Peugeot owned the rights to any 3-digit car name with a 0 in the middle. Peugeot had been using names like 203, 403, 504 for decades. They objected to the 901. Porsche changed the name to 911. The 0 became a 1. The 911 was born. The first 911s arrived in 1964. The engine was a flat 6, air-cooled, mounted in the rear. The displacement was 2.0 liters. The power was 128 horsepower. That doesn't sound like much today. A modern Toyota Camry has over 200 horsepower. But in 1964, 128 horsepower in a car that weighed just 2,300 pounds was exciting. The 911 was also expensive. It cost about $6,500 in 1965, which is roughly $55,000 today. It was more expensive than a Jaguar E-Type. It was more expensive than a Mercedes-Benz 230 SL. It was a car for the wealthy, for the discerning, for those who valued engineering and design over brute power. The early 911s had a reputation. They were fast, but they were tricky. The rear engine layout meant that the weight was behind the rear axle. In a corner, if you lifted off the throttle, the weight would transfer to the front, the rear would get light, and the car would spin. It was called lift-off oversteer. It caught many inexperienced drivers by surprise. The 911 was not a car for beginners. It was a car for experts. But that was part of the appeal. The 911 rewarded skill. It demanded respect. It was a driver's car in the purest sense. If you could drive a 911 fast, you could drive anything fast. Over the next decade, the 911 evolved. The engine grew. 2.2 liters, 2.4 liters, 2.7 liters. Power increased. 140 horsepower, 160, 180. The car grew wider tires, better brakes, improved suspension. The 911S, introduced in 1966, was the performance version. The 911 Targa, introduced in 1967, had a removable roof panel and a stainless steel roll bar. It was named after the Targa Florio road race in Sicily, which Porsche had won multiple times. The 911 was not just a road car, it was a race car. The 911R, introduced in 1967, was a lightweight version designed for competition. Only 20 were built. They weighed just 1,800 pounds. They won rallies, hill climbs, and endurance races. The 911 was proving that the rear engine could work, even at the highest levels of motorsport. But the 911 was also facing competition. The 1960s and 1970s saw the rise of mid-engine sports cars, the Ferrari Dino, the Lamborghini Miura, the Di Tommaso Pantera. These cars had their engines in the middle, behind the driver but ahead of the rear axle. This was considered the ideal layout for handling. The rear-engine 911 was seen by some as outdated, as a relic of the Volkswagen Beetle. Porsche knew this. They experimented with mid-engine designs. The 914, launched in 1969, was a mid-engine car built in collaboration with Volkswagen. It was cheaper than the 911, but it was not as fast. The 928, launched in 1977, was a front-engine V8 Grand Tourer. It was more comfortable than the 911, more luxurious, more modern. Porsche expected the 928 to replace the 911. They thought the 911's time had passed. But the 911 refused to die. Customers kept buying it. Enthusiasts kept loving it. The 911 had a character that the 914 and the 928 could not match. It was quirky, demanding, alive. It was not perfect, but it was passionate. And passion cannot be engineered. So the 911 continued, and in 1974, something happened that would define the 911 for the next 50 years, something that would turn the Widowmaker into a legend. The turbocharger arrived. Part 2, the Turbo Revolution. The 930 Turbo was unveiled at the Paris Motor Show in 1974. It was based on the 911 Carrera RS 3.0, a lightweight homologation special. The engine was a 3-liter flat-six with a single turbocharger. Power was 256 horsepower. That was enormous for 1974. The Ferrari 308 GTB had 240 horsepower. The Lamborghini Countach had 370 horsepower, but it cost twice as much. The 930 Turbo was not just powerful, it was violent. The turbocharger created lag. You would press the throttle and nothing would happen. Then, a second later, the boost would hit. All 256 horsepower would arrive at once. The rear tires would spin, the tail would step out, the car would try to kill you. The 930 Turbo earned a nickname, the Widowmaker, because it killed inexperienced drivers. The combination of rear-engine weight distribution, turbo lag, and sudden power was lethal. If you lifted off the throttle mid-corner, the weight would transfer forward, the rear would get light, and the turbo would spool down. Then you would get back on the throttle, the boost would hit, and the car would spin. It was a recipe for disaster. But for those who could master it, the 930 Turbo was transcendent. It was raw, brutal, exciting. It was the most thrilling car on the market. It was the car that defined the 911 as a supercar. The 930 Turbo evolved over the years. The engine grew to 3.3 liters. Power increased to 300 horsepower. The car gained larger brakes, wider wheels, a whale-tail rear wing. The 930 Turbo remained in production until 1989. It sold over 20,000 units. It was a success. But the 911 was facing an existential threat. The 1980s were a difficult decade for Porsche. The global economy was uncertain. Fuel prices were high. The demand for sports cars was down. And Porsche had other models, the 924, the 944, the 928. These were front-engined, water-cooled cars that were supposed to be the future. The 911 was the past. Porsche management debated killing the 911. They thought it was obsolete. They thought the 928 would replace it. They thought the 944 would be the entry-level sports car. They planned to end 911 production in the early 1980s. But the customers would not let it die. Every time Porsche announced the end of the 911, orders increased. Enthusiasts wrote letters. Dealers protested. The 911 had a cult following that the 914 and the 928 could not match. It was quirky, demanding, alive. It was not perfect, but it was passionate. And passion cannot be engineered. So the 911 continued. And in 1974, something happened that would define the 911 for the next 50 years. Something that would turn the Widowmaker into a legend. The turbocharger arrived. Part 2. The Rebirth and the Controversy. The 964 generation, introduced in 1989, was the first major redesign of the 911 in 25 years. It looked like a 911, but underneath it was completely new. The suspension was revised, the steering was improved, the brakes were upgraded. The engine was a 3.6-liter flat-six with 247 horsepower, and the all-wheel drive system, borrowed from the 959 supercar, was available. The 964 was a better car than the old 911. It was faster, safer, more comfortable. But it was also heavier, more complex, more expensive. Some purists complained that the 964 had lost the rawness of the original. They said it was too civilized. They missed the Widowmaker. But the 964 sold well. Over 60,000 were built. It proved that the 911 could evolve without losing its identity. It proved that the rear engine could still work. It proved that Porsche had made the right decision to keep the 911 alive. Then came the 993. The 993, introduced in 1993, was the last air-cooled 911. It was also the most beautiful. The body was smoother, more integrated. The headlights were more aerodynamic. The rear wing was integrated into the body. The 993 is widely considered the best-looking 911 ever built. The 993 Turbo was a masterpiece. It had twin turbochargers, all-wheel drive, and 400 horsepower. It was fast, stable, and surprisingly easy to drive. The Widowmaker had been tamed. The 993 Turbo could be driven by anyone. It was a supercar that you could daily drive.
The 993 also had a special version. The 911 GT2, introduced in 1995, was a rear-wheel drive, turbocharged monster with 430 horsepower. It had no electronic aids. It was the last of the true Widowmakers. It was brutal, dangerous, and collectible. A 993 GT2 today is worth over $2 million. But the 993 was the end. The air-cooled engine could not meet the emissions regulations that were coming. Porsche had to switch to water cooling. It was a difficult decision. The air-cooled engine was part of the 911's identity. It was what made the 911 sound the way it sounded, feel the way it felt. Changing to water cooling was like changing the heart of the car. The 996 generation, introduced in 1997, was the most controversial 911 ever. It was water-cooled. It had a completely new engine, a 3.4-liter flat-six producing 296 horsepower. It shared its headlights with the cheaper Boxster. The interior was modern, but some said it was cheap. The 996 looked like a 911, but it did not feel like a 911. Purists hated it. The 996 was also the most reliable 911 ever. The water-cooled engine was more durable, more efficient, more powerful. The 996 could be driven every day in any weather without worry. It was a sports car for the modern world. But the 996 had problems. The intermediate shaft bearing, known as the IMS bearing, could fail catastrophically, destroying the engine. It was a design flaw that affected thousands of cars. Porsche eventually fixed the issue, but the damage to the 996's reputation was done. The 996 sold well. Over 175,000 were built. It brought new customers to Porsche. It kept the company profitable. But it was not loved. Not like the air-cooled cars. Not like the 993. Then came the 997. The 997, introduced in 2004, fixed the styling mistakes of the 996. The headlights were round again. The interior was improved. The car looked like a 911 again. The 997 was the car that brought the purists back. The 997 also introduced the modern GT3. The 997 GT3 had a 3.6-liter flat-six producing 415 horsepower. It was rear-wheel drive, naturally aspirated, and manual. It was the purest expression of the 911 philosophy. The 997 GT3 RS was even more extreme, with a 3.8-liter engine, a rear wing, and lightweight materials. It was a race car for the road. The 997 Turbo had 480 horsepower from a twin-turbo 3.6-liter engine. It was fast, stable, and comfortable. It was the grand tourer that the 928 had always wanted to be. The 997 was a success. It sold over 200,000 units. It restored the 911's reputation. It proved that water cooling could work. It proved that the 911 could evolve and still be the 911. Part 4. The Modern Icons. The 991 generation, introduced in 2011, was the most advanced 911 yet. It was larger, wider, more powerful. The wheelbase was longer, which improved stability. The body was made of aluminum, which reduced weight. The engine was a 3.4-liter flat-six in the base model and a 3.8-liter in the S. Power ranged from 350 to 400 horsepower. The 991 introduced electric power steering. Purists complained. They said the hydraulic steering of the 97 was better. They said the 991 felt numb. But the 991 was faster. It was more efficient. It was the future. The 993 GT3 was a revelation. It had a 3.8-liter flat-six producing 475 horsepower. It revved to 9,000 RPM. It had a dual-clutch transmission, not a manual. Purists complained again. They said the GT3 needed a manual. But the dual-clutch was faster. It shifted in milliseconds. The 993 GT3 lapped the Nürburgring in 7 minutes and 25 seconds. That was supercar territory. The 991 GT2 RS was the ultimate 911. It had a 3.8-liter twin-turbo flat-six producing 700 horsepower. It was rear-wheel drive. It was brutal. It lapped the Nürburgring in 6 minutes and 47 seconds. It was the fastest production 911 ever built. The 991 also had a special edition. The 99R, introduced in 2016, was a back-to-basics 911. It had a naturally aspirated 4-liter flat-six from the GT3, but it had a manual transmission. It had no rear wing, it had lightweight materials. It was the purist's dream. Only 991 were built. They sold out instantly. They are now worth over $500,000. The 996 generation, introduced in 2008, is the current 911. It is the most powerful, most capable, most technologically advanced 911 ever. The base model has 379 horsepower. The S-Turbo has 640 horsepower. The GT3 has 502 horsepower from a 4-liter naturally aspirated flat-six that revs to 9,000 RPM. The GT3 RS has 518 horsepower, massive aerodynamic wings, and active suspension. It lapped the Nürburgring in 6 minutes and 44 seconds. It is a race car with license plates. The 992 also has a hybrid. The 991 GTS Hybrid, introduced in 2024, uses a small electric motor to assist the twin-turbo flat-six. It produces 534 horsepower. It is the first electrified 911. It will not be the last. Because the 911 is facing its greatest challenge yet. The internal combustion engine is being banned. Governments around the world are setting deadlines. The 911 must become electric or it must die. Porsche knows this. They are working on an electric 911. It will not be the 911 we know. It will be different. It will be silent. It will be heavy. But it will still be a 911. It will still have the engine in the back, even if that engine is electric. It will still have the shape, the silhouette, the soul. The electric 911 is coming. It will be controversial. It will be hated by purists. But it will also bring new customers to Porsche. It will keep the 911 alive for another 60 years. Part 5. The GT Division. Before we close, let us talk about the cars that define the 911 as a performance icon. The GT Division. The GT3, the GT2, the GT3 RS, the GT2 RS. These are the most extreme 911s. These are the cars that enthusiasts dream about. The GT3 is the track-focused, naturally aspirated 911. It has a high-revving flat-six, a stiff suspension, a rear wing, and a manual or dual-clutch transmission. It is designed for the driver who wants to lap the Nürburgring on the weekend and drive home on Monday. The GT3 RS is even more extreme. It has a larger wing, more aggressive aerodynamics, and a more powerful engine. The current GT3 RS has a 4-liter flat-six producing 518 horsepower. It has active aerodynamics with a drag reduction system borrowed from Formula One. It is the closest thing to a race car that you can buy. The GT2 RS is the turbocharged version. It has 700 horsepower. It is rear-wheel drive. It is terrifying. It is the Widowmaker reborn. The GT2 RS is for experts only. These GT cars are the heart of the 911. They prove that the rear engine layout is not a compromise. It is an advantage. The weight over the rear axle provides traction. The rear engine allows for a short, stiff chassis. The 911 handles differently from any other car. It is unique. It is special. And that is why the 911 has survived. It is not the fastest. It is not the most powerful. It is not the most efficient. But it is the most characterful. It has personality. It has soul. It has 60 years of history, of evolution, of passion.
Part 6. The Future. Where does the 911 go from here? The electric 911 is coming. Porsche has announced that the next generation, the 994, will be offered with internal combustion engines and hybrid systems. But the generation after that, the 995, will be fully electric. The combustion engine will be gone. The sound will be gone. The manual transmission will be gone. But the 911 will remain. It will adapt. It will evolve. It will survive. Because the 911 is not an engine. It is not a transmission. It is not a layout. It is an idea. The idea that a sports car can be beautiful, practical, and thrilling. The idea that a car can be driven every day and enjoyed on the weekend. The idea that perfection is not a destination, it is a pursuit. 60 years of perfection, that is the 911. From the air-cooled flat six of the 1960s to the water-cooled masterpiece of today. From the Widowmaker Turbo to the civilized daily driver. From the racetracks of Le Mans to the garages of collectors. The 911 is the most successful sports car in history. It has sold over 1.2 million units. It has won countless races. It has inspired generations of enthusiasts. And it is not done. It will continue. It will evolve. It will survive. Because the 911 is not just a car, it is a promise. The promise that Porsche will always build a sports car for those who love to drive. The promise that the rear engine will never die. The promise that perfection is always worth pursuing. Thank you for joining me on this 8-hour journey through the story of the Porsche 911. 60 years of perfection, 60 years of passion, 60 years of the most iconic sports car in history. I am Royal Luxury Cars. Thank you for listening. Drive safely, drive passionately, and never stop asking what a car can be. This has been Porsche 911, 60 years of perfection.